Sensation in the story of the Alaska oil spill. An unlicensed mate was in command when the tanker ran aground. Soviet ballots show victories for some critics of the government. And after a wild weekend of basketball action, it's down to the Final Four. This is the CBS Morning News. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charles Osgood.
And I'm Lynn Brown. Faith Daniels will be joining us later on CBS This Morning. It is Monday, March 27th. Leading our news this morning, how a broken rule led to a broken ship.
Exxon admits today that an unlicensed third mate in violation of federal regulations was piloting the giant oil tanker Exxon Valdez when it struck a reef on Friday and split open. The ship has spilled millions of gallons of oil into Alaska's Prince William Sound. The slick now covers more than 100 square miles, and Alaska's Governor Steve Cooper has declared the Sound a disaster area. John Blackstone reports on the desperate cleanup effort.
Strong winds blowing in over the mountains around Prince William Sound may complicate today's cleanup. Chemical dispersant sprayed on the oil may work better in rougher seas, but other parts of the cleanup will get harder. Trouble from this man-made disaster. John Blackstone, CBS News, Valdez, Alaska.
Ahead, CBS This Morning will have more on the cleanup and a live interview with Alaska Governor Steve Cooper.
Soviet voters are enjoying their first taste of what democracy could be like today as the ballots from Sunday's elections continue to be counted. And a Moscow maverick is declaring that he has won in a landslide. Barry Peterson is at our CBS News Bureau in the Soviet capital, and he joins us now. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Charles. We're awaiting the official results, but our sources at the election central in downtown Moscow tell us that when those results are announced, it'll break down probably this way. About 80% of the vote for Yeltsin, his opponent who runs the state limousine factory getting about 10%, and the remaining voters chose neither. Yeltsin this morning was in what he called a good mood, unwilling to talk about his opponents, anxious to thank the voters who supported him. It's a victory for the progressive forces, he said. It answers the people's demand. He said he plans to take a month's vacation, but spent today at his office in the construction ministry, a job he was given after he was ousted from the Politburo a year ago. The Yeltsin win was apparent early on as Moscow's citizens went to the polls. But his was not the only race. Hundreds of districts had more than one candidate running, something most Soviets have not seen in their elections since the days of Lenin. It may be several days before the totals are known in some races, and the Soviets are learning that democracy isn't always tidy. In one race with 12 candidates, no one won a clear majority, so there will be a runoff. A far cry from the days of one candidate always winning 99.9% of the vote. As for Yeltsin, he's on the comeback trail, a political maverick who might have been crushed by his opponents in another era. Now he's the hero of the people with the mandate to match. Charles?
Barry, is there a message in this apparent Yeltsin win for Mikhail Gorbachev?
Yeltsin says there is. He says this morning it means that this country is more than ready for reform. And by Yeltsin standards, that means reform faster than what Gorbachev is now accomplishing.
Thank you, Barry. Barry Peterson in Moscow. Lynn?
While Soviet voters were enjoying the novel experience of having a choice, Soviet television was also cutting its teeth on election coverage. Jonathan Sanders reports on how Moscow TV joined the glasnost bandwagon.
Soviet television was beating the drum for the new elections, but it wasn't just playing in the propaganda band. Soviet television has become part of the campaign process. Contested elections are completely new. Reporters swarmed all over the country to measure reactions. Lots of positive reactions, of course. But glasnost means not having to agree, even on official Soviet TV. I'm not voting. Why? It's all nonsense. All these innovations will do nothing. Millions did believe enough to vote. That was the big story on the evening news. Since it's all so new, there was no basis for voter projections or fancy election studios to broadcast results. But they did break into regular programming with flash results from one little Moscow district where Boris Yeltsin trounced his opponent. Results are still coming in and will for weeks. But in their first real election coverage, Soviet TV really got the picture. Jonathan Sanders, CBS News, Moscow.
In Guatemala this morning, prison inmates continue to hold hundreds of Easter visitors hostage, and the army has the prison surrounded. The trouble started when inmates raided the prison guards' gun supply and then tried to escape. That led to a shootout, and the government says at least 3 guards, 7 inmates were killed.
New York City police are searching this morning for 3 men and a 17th century violin worth $150,000. Musician Christopher Lee was mugged this Easter weekend, and the thieves got his Francisco Ruggieri violin, made in Italy around 1680. The rare violin once belonged to Leopold Mozart, the father and teacher of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
What a shame. Good morning, Mark McHugh, and you have brought with you great weather, sunshine. We're all smiling.
Can I go home now?
No. We need to know the rest.
Thanks. Take a look at the satellite. It is Easter Monday around here, and well, half the nation yesterday had temperatures in the 70s, the eastern half. They had a white Easter in Flagstaff, Arizona. Southwest storm is moving into Texas now as showers and thunderstorms are roaming about. It's a rainy morning across the northwest. That's Final Four country, by the way. Look at the eastern seaboard. Hardly a cloud to be found from Florida to Maine. Now, later on today, eastern half of the nation will be skipping a season today, as summery weather will be enjoyed with many areas reaching into the 70s and the 80s. The southern and central plains will have to deal with some potentially severe thunderstorms, so be prepared to take shelter. Elsewhere, the northwest will get wet, while the southwest is going to dry out. Boy, what a great day to make Easter salad right after yesterday. Actually, egg salad. That's a quick look at the national forecast. Let's take a look at your weather. For New York, sunny skies, high of 69. Chicago, afternoon thunderstorms, high of 74. Sunny skies, high of 82 in Miami. Dallas, afternoon thunderstorms, a high will be 77. Denver, mostly cloudy skies, a high will be 60. Wonderful degrees. Egg salad Monday, I think that's what they call it around here.
It's going to be egg salad sandwiches all week, Mark.
All week long.
I'm getting away from it. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Still ahead on the CBS Morning News, an Illinois alley-oop helps the Fighting Illini reach the NCAA's Final Four for the first time since 1952. This Monday, March 27th.
On the CBS Morning News, here's a look at your weather.
Stories. Exxon says an unlicensed officer was piloting the tanker Exxon Valdez on Friday when it hit a reef in Alaska's Prince William Sound, causing an immense oil spill. The governor has declared the sound a disaster area. And maverick communist Boris Yeltsin claims he won 90% of the Moscow vote in Sunday's Soviet returns for a new Congress.
While the Soviets seem to be taking a step toward Western-style elections, China is moving away from Western-style economics. The Chinese parliament wound up its annual meeting today. John Sheehan in Beijing has a report.
This year's session of China's parliament signals a radical change in direction, away from 10 years' progress toward a semi-capitalist economy. Prime Minister Li Peng warned that China had tried to change too quickly and announced a return to more centralized economic control. Major construction projects are to be canceled and construction or business loans cut off because the booming economy has outstripped supplies of fuel, transportation, and electricity. Special taxes will be imposed on private or collective businesses and on free market farmers. Clearly in the driver's seat are the conservative communists who continually compare the huge country's economy to a captive bird. Reformers may from time to time enlarge the cage, they say, but they must never be permitted to let the bird fly free. For older Chinese, the partial rollback of reforms is just one more shift in a zigzag course that has spanned a lifetime. But there is a new entrepreneurial class in China. Millions of small business operators whose lives have improved. The government leaders could be calling for a return to a degree of old-style communism that this younger, more rebellious generation may find very hard to accept. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
10 years after the signing of the historic Camp David Accord with Egypt, former Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin says there is still no cause for celebration. Begin has lived in seclusion since 1983. In a rare interview on Israeli radio, he praised the peace treaty he signed with the late Egyptian President Anwar Sadat at Camp David, but he expressed disappointment that after so long, the two countries still have not fully normalize their relations. A lull is reported this morning in Beirut, where Lebanese Christian and pro-Syrian Muslim militias spent the weekend trading artillery barrages. An estimated 2,000 shells were fired by the two sides last night alone in what's described as the worst fighting in Lebanon in 5 years. At least 73 people have been killed and more than 200 wounded in the past 2 weeks.
In Washington, U.S. officials are denying British newspaper reports that the terrorists who bombed Pan Am Flight 103 have been identified and located. The Sunday Times of London said U.S. agents are ready to move in on the suspects, members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command. But on the CBS News broadcast Face the Nation, White House National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft said no suspects have been identified.
There's a marvelous bit of detective work going on in this whole thing, and it's incredible how they're able to develop their leads. But so far as I know, we're not that far along.
270 people died in the air and on the ground when Pan Am 103 was blown apart over Lockerbie, Scotland.
There is still no official word this morning on news reports that Iran's Navy has hijacked a yacht carrying members of Kuwait's royal family, as well as 4 British citizens. The yacht is said to have been intercepted in the Persian Gulf last Thursday. According to one report, Iran is demanding a ransom, but so far neither Kuwait nor Iran is confirming that there has even been a hijacking. In the waters off Florida, a 30-hour standoff between Haitian refugees and the U.S. Coast Guard has ended peacefully. The Coast Guard stopped a boat packed with 250 Haitian refugees on Saturday. Some of the refugees then threatened to throw their babies overboard unless they were allowed to continue on to the United States. But the Haitians eventually gave in and agreed to board a Coast Guard vessel to be taken back to their homeland.
The head of the Food and Drug Administration says investigators have narrowed their search for the people who poisoned Chilean grapes that were shipped to this country. According to FDA Chief Frank Young, the cyanide-laced grapes have been traced back to a small Chilean fruit producer. Young said no arrests are imminent, but those involved could be prosecuted under U.S. laws. In Washington this morning, President Bush is catching flack from a senior member of his own administration. Jacqueline Adams reports.
Grandchildren, dogs, and helicopter noise provided the distractions on Sunday when President Bush returned to a White House that had abruptly stopped celebrating its first foreign policy victory. Officials were baffled when the president's own counsel, C. Boyden Gray, took a shot at the hard-won $40 million contra-aid deal, publicly complaining that it tied the president's hands by giving Congress veto power over contra-aid in the future. Gray didn't hide his irritation over not being consulted while Secretary of State James Baker negotiated with congressional leaders. Baker, a lawyer himself, pointedly noted Gray's absence from the inner circle.
The president, the chief of staff, the national security advisor to the president.
This is the CBS Morning News for Monday, March 27th.
In San Diego this morning, the wife of the Navy captain who ordered the downing of an Iranian passenger jet is asking for help in trying to find out who killed her. Sharon Rogers had to run for her life when a bomb set her van on fire. Mrs. Rogers, whose features have been obscured on tape for security reasons, tells how the bombing changed her life.
My life has been threatened. That of my family has been threatened. I have lost my job. I can't go back to my home. And my life has completely done a turnaround.
Today, San Diego television stations will begin airing public service announcements asking for help in solving the crime.
In Houston, a rescue team managed to pull 2 women and a baby from the wreckage of a car that plunged into a 45-foot hole. The car veered off a street and broke through barricades before landing at the bottom of the hole, which was being dug for a storm sewer. One of the women suffered only minor injuries. The other woman and the baby are in guarded condition this morning in a Houston hospital. Well, baseball spring training season is winding down, but before opening day, the other shoe is expected to drop in the Pete Rose controversy. Peter Van Sant has more from the Cincinnati Reds spring training camp.
Of American towns and cities have cracked down on skateboard riders, but City Hall's a little more open-minded down in Sydney, Australia. Nugget, a speed demon if ever there was one, was banned from the city's boardwalk. But after heated protests from residents and tourists, Nugget is back on his board with a special license as an official street performer. That's our final nugget of the morning.
And he's not bad either. That is the CBS Morning News for Monday, March 27th. I'm Lynn Brown.
And I'm Charles Osgood. Stay with us at the top of the hour for CBS This Morning with Harry Smith and Faith Daniels in for Kathleen Sullivan.
The best reporter on the beat. That's the signature of a great news organization. You always know when it's CBS News.
I'm Harry Smith. Coming up, nanny envy, working mothers jealous of people who care for their kids. Also, Evel Knievel joins us coming up on CBS This Morning.
This is CBS.
Rodney D. Young presents